Jason, do you ever wonder what would happen to March in the NBA media if there was no draft lottery and if there was no MVP awards to argue about? Because then, like, anti-tanking policy conversations out. We wouldn't be having this conversation every year. And then also MVP awards, we would just focus on the games. Could the NBA media sustain itself just by talking about the games?
You know, it's so fascinating because this part of the season is easily the toughest part of the season as like a daily NBA content creator, because there's only so many times you can talk about the strengths and weaknesses of each individual team. It's like, thank God Joel Embiid and Paul George came back. Because like when you have like something, it's like, hey, we have something to talk about here for a little bit in terms of something happening on the court. There's only so many times that I can discuss, you know, specifically how Oklahoma City can struggle with offensive rebounding sometimes, or how like if you rush their shooters, their percentages drop versus when they're wide open, they can be pretty reliable. Or like there's only so many times you can tread that territory. And so thankfully, you know, we've had enough kind of random stories this year. Like Houston's collapse, I think, has been somewhat interesting, although they've turned it around as Şengün. Yeah, Jason Tatum back. The Lakers like randomly go like I've had a major issue with Lakers fans, like the revisionist history, pretending like they weren't terrible pre All-Star break, as if they didn't get their butt kicked literally every time they played a good team for 50 games, but having enough of that has made it a little easier this year. But there are some years where it's even worse, where you don't have that intriguing post-deadline story and it can get into the morass this time of year. I've actually done more college basketball stuff than ever before this year, just because I'm looking for things to kind of kill the time. It's definitely one of those dog days of the regular season eras right now.
Yeah, but I think it's... Look, the tanking fixes is the stuff that gives me an aneurysm, but like the MVP conversation, I think is a good thing that we have this many worthy candidates. Like there's a different argument for all these guys, whether it's Shea, whether it's Luka, Jokic, Victor Wembanyama, like Jaylen Brown, obviously. Like I like where we're at on this. What I don't like is that the specter of the 65 game rule is threatening to put a damper on all this conversation. And, you know, I've always thought it was a dumb rule. I've said it from the beginning. But, Jason, I'm curious, do you think it feels like we're going to avert the absolute disaster of all these guys being ineligible. But had it happened, do you think that would have compelled the league to change that rule?
You know, I think it might have compelled them to tweak it. I mean, so the idea behind the rule, right, is you're trying to get the marginal indecision, like the decision between I'm healthy and good to go and I'm hurt and I cannot go. You want those games to tilt more towards guys playing, right? Like that's the idea. And I'd argue that has worked. I mean, there's a reason why Jokic and Wemby and Luka and all these guys are playing every damn game here down the stretch of the season. It's because they literally have to. But I think they could have made potentially, like, I think if you saw all these guys miss, they might have been like, how about we make it 60 instead of 65? I don't necessarily think it was the spirit of the rule that had an issue. It was more just the number started to clash with the simple fact that the NBA right now is so athletic, so up and down. I think even just within the half court, the amount of ground coverage that there is as guys are rotating to shooters and playing drive and kick basketball, there's just so much that's stressing the body that it was leading to legitimate breakdown injuries. Like Luka has a breakdown soft tissue injury. Obviously Shea in the form of his abdominal injury. Giannis can't hold up anymore. Jokic has his first knee injuries. Like there's just so many injuries that were piling up that like they need to find that sweet spot. And it looks like 65 might work, but I think if they ended up after a 3-5 year sample having multiple years where some of the best players in the league are missing all NBA or missing MVP, I think they might drop it to 60. But I don't think that it's an issue with the rule. It's just you try something and you make tweaks as you get more data. And this year is a data point that's relatively low. But to your point, I mean, it looks like these guys are all going to make it. So it might not be that big of a deal.
I just don't think we need a rule. And also, if the 65 game rule is being measured and its success is being measured on that 4 candidates, these top 4 candidates are still in the running, that's fine. But we can't ignore the elephant in the room that we are seeing the injury crisis reach to extreme levels where the guys are playing 60% of the games now. And a lot of that is because I think downstream effects of the 65 game rule is that if they're injured to the point where they're disqualified from the 65 game qualification, they'll just pull the plug on the season and just say like, yeah, I'm just out. And so we see Trae Young, Anthony Davis, Giannis is trying to come back, obviously. But I just think we can't ignore that these guys are missing so many games. Stars are missing so many games now. And yes, the top 4 candidates are playing every night right now. But I don't know. When NBC and ESPN and Prime are showing these games, a lot of times, Jason, they're having to go for like the 4th string guy as like the face of the game. And it's hard to know. Like, it's Spurs,
and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't know how long that's sustainable. And maybe Adam Silver in the league doesn't care about that, but I can probably guarantee you that the TV partners care about that.
Yeah, I've always thought when we've discussed shortening the season, we've over-indexed towards like game volume being the main driver of revenue versus game quality. I mean, like, I think the NCAA tournament is the best example of this. The thing makes $1 billion and you win 6 games to win the tournament. And obviously there's a high volume of games in that first weekend, but the point is it's the quality of the hoops that drives the viewership, that drives the advertising revenue, that drives everything that makes money about the NCAA tournament. And like, we can take this a step further when we talk about tanking, because like, I just think it's really stupid to ever have a team that's intentionally losing play against a team that's trying to win. I think that's like a fundamental flaw in NBA scheduling. But like when you have a schedule that is naturally, even though guys know they need to play in order to get all NBA, which is now directly affecting their income, like they need to play and they're still not playing in a lot of these cases. Like Cade, like legitimately is missing the end of the season. Now his injury is more fluky. He took a knee to the rib cage. But the point is like these guys want to play under the circumstances and they can't because their bodies aren't allowing them to. At what point do we acknowledge that the schedule is what's causing that? And if we could get to a situation where maybe there's a 20% decrease in game volume, but there's a 20% increase in game quality, either through intensity because of how much it matters in the standings, to the star participation. And I'd argue star participation on a possession to possession basis, like just getting the guys to actually care and play hard. Like we've all seen the game where it's a big national TV game and it happens to break right where like the guys are healthy. There's a decent amount of rest on either side of the game for both teams. And it happens to matter in the standing. So take, for example, like Lakers Rockets, the second one when Şengün played, or that Rockets Wolves catastrophe where both teams tried to lose at the end. Like when you get those types of games, they are remarkable television products. They capture that feel of an NBA playoff game. And if we could somehow replace lost inventory with that amount of increased intensity and quality of the games, I don't see how that wouldn't cancel out some of the financial downside that comes with the loss in volume, especially when you factor in like you can continue to give the national TV partners the same amount of games. And it would just end up costing in the regional television department, which is already kind of flawed and falling apart to begin with.
Yeah. You coming right at Tom right now?
Hold on. Hold on now.
Let's hear it, Tom. Let's hear it.
I'm just saying, Blazers, Clippers tonight. Catch it on Blazer Vision. We got Neil Everett live in LA for that game, which is huge implications on the play-in tournament. No, I totally agree with you that there's some wiggle room here, that I feel like there is some slack in the system. I have a story out right now, or coming out right now, on Yahoo Sports about the new stratification of the league that now there's a B league and an A league.
Right.
Because of the play-in tournament and the tanking, we've now subtly created 2 different leagues. Like you said, there's teams trying to win and there's teams trying to lose. And never before have we seen it so stratified, where there's a 10-game gap between the 10 seed in the East and the 11 seed. There's a 10-game gap between the 10 seed in the West and the 10 seed in the. We've never seen that large of a gap in NBA history.
I was pushed back. That's not the norm, though. That's not like this is a very specific set of circumstances that involves a draft class that is widely regarded to be not only very top heavy, but deep. Like that, wherever you're picking, you're going to get some incredible talent. You've got more than a handful of teams that were placed in this. Like, so Indiana is not here because of some strategic decision. And matter of fact, they and the Heat are probably the two organizations that are most anti-tanking in the entire NBA. They're here because they're hurt, and their year started so awfully that there was no point in trying to come back and make a passionate run or whatever. I think kind of, sort of, you could say the same thing about the Wizards. Like I don't know how much the Wizards intended to be this bad to start the season. Milwaukee, for certain,
I totally disagree with you on that. I totally disagree
about the Wizards or about the Bucks.
Wizards, yeah.
I don't think they were trying to be bad to start. I think they started and they're like, "Holy shit, we're awful."
So you think they wanted to be the Hornets, kind of thing? Yeah,
absolutely. I think looking at how they ended the year last year, they thought, okay, this is the year where we make a push for maybe the play-in. And then shit happens, and it's just like, never mind. Which, by the way,
the top 8 protected pick was never a new thing. That was always there.
Yeah.
So,
but I don't think they set out to be a bottom 8 team. I think at some point you realize, hey, this pipe dream we have, not going to happen. So we might as well lean into it and make sure we keep that pick, which, by the way, is usually how tanking happens in our league. It's very rare do you have an organization that says, like Utah, for example, like punt on the whole year before it's even started. Or like Philly a few years ago, punt on several years before any of them have started. Usually, like if you look at right now, Sacramento, Dallas, Memphis, Indiana to start the year, Chicago, Milwaukee, and I'll throw in Washington, but I'll keep Washington out just to for the sake of argument, keep Washington out. The teams I don't name, they all thought they were going to be playing meaningful basketball right now when they started their season. And then shit happens. And then you have to make a business decision. Do I fight against hopelessness, or do I lean into it and get a benefit out of it? And that's the part where I'm like, none of the stuff that we're talking about as far as tanking fixes ever really address that.
Yeah. When I looked at those 3 anti-tanking proposals, and they were described as radical, the third one, which was like the 5x5 rule, didn't seem radical at all to me. It was just the bottom 5 teams are now the same odds in getting the number 1 overall pick. And it seemed like, yes, they're bringing in playoff teams into this, but I don't know what you think, Jason.
The radical part is the second lottery. You know what's better than one lottery? 2 lotteries.
Jason, are you with me on this? Is that we cannot have a solution that requires a manual to explain to people? That can't be the solution.
Absolutely. Like when it comes to the odds and all of the different ways that they can put the odds together, it literally doesn't matter how much they flatten the odds. Teams that are bad will be incentivized to drop and to try to get into that bottom tier, whatever that tier is, to try to get a top pick. I mean, Victor Wembanyama, when he's on the floor this year, the Spurs are plus 645 and they're minus 27 when he's off.
He's 22 years old.
How can you not think that a top pick is your best pathway to transform your fortunes? So regardless of how they flatten the odds, you're naturally going to end up with teams gravitating towards the bottom. It is a completely unavoidable problem. Now, so I want to pitch this. I've pitched this on Twitter the other day, but I don't want you to think of it more as a practical thing. I want you to think of it as more of a thought exercise, because we can all acknowledge the practical limitations of this sort of thing. To Amin's point, I do think that if you're a Wizards GM, you're like, we go into the season and we think, let's see what these guys got.
Yeah.
And then you make a judgment call. And if, like, for instance, if the Hornets had not flashed the way that they flashed, I do think they probably end up tanking towards the tail end of the season and giving Khan a ton of touches and finding a reason to bench LaMelo and like doing all these different things to try to just accentuate player development and getting towards the bottom of the standings. You have these two phases of the season. Tom, you made the point that there's like two leagues. I agree. There's also like two phases to the season. There's the beginning of the season when you're all full of piss and vinegar and you're like, we're going to go out there and show everybody what we got and we're going to demonstrate where we're at in our development. And it's kind of like, even for the teams that are like dead serious, really well run, it's an educational period where you take in a bunch of data about where your team is at and their development. I'd argue, especially in that first couple of months of the season, that's the stretch of the season when effort level is most consistently high around the league. So that's when you can get a lot of the great data. That's why a lot of NBA history tells us it's the teams that start great that are great playoff teams, not the teams that end great that are great playoff teams, right? So like the way I look at it, I pitched this idea the other day. Just imagine a universe where everybody plays everybody twice in the first chunk of the season. So what's that, 58 games or whatever
58
it is?
games,
okay.
Yep.
Everybody plays everybody twice. So all the owners get to have, Luka and LeBron and Wemby and all the different stars come into their arena once, right? So everyone gets satisfied in terms of feeling like they're a part of the NBA. Then you have the All-Star break. Make it as long as it needs to logistically handle it. But have at that point, the bottom 5 teams from both conferences basically break off into that second league. And if they're going to intentionally lose, and I don't care what you do with the draft odds at that point, if you flatten them, if you tier them to where it's like the NFL, where the worst record does get the best pick no matter what, like whatever you decide to do, it doesn't matter. Let them go after the top pick, but let them intentionally lose against each other. let them. Yeah. Well, it's so funny because that night last Friday was so funny to me because I'm like, the stars don't want to be there. Those teams have no interest in being there. They're literally playing crap basketball because they have no interest in being there. Then you're also taking the competitive, hard-playing dudes on the other team and being like, hey, dude, nice job putting your team up by 7. Now go sit down while we intentionally lose this game. It's bad for us watching. It's bad for the young team that's trying to get better, and it's bad for the good team that's trying to play good basketball before they, like the Lakers have to play the Cavs tonight, and they just played the Wizards, the Nets, and the Pacers back to back to back. You think they're going to be playing their best basketball tonight? Like, I'm worried about it. So like, it's one of those things where just, again, as a thought exercise, imagine that sort of temporary relegation situation where you basically are taking all the good teams and having them play playoff tune-ups against each other, jockeying for position, and then having the bottom third teams just play against each other and do their development, tanking, whatever it is that they want to do. Right. I just think it doesn't make any sense to have a dead serious playoff team play a team intentionally losing in March. It just doesn't make any sense. And like, to Amin's point, I don't think you can properly account for the fact that at the beginning of the season, these teams do try to identify where they're at. There's 2 phases to the season. And when that phase shifts, I think we need to shift our approach in how we build the schedule.
In the month of March, the B League teams, so that's 9 teams. I'm not counting New Orleans because they've actually been good for the last 2 months. The bottom 9 teams are 12-98 against the A League teams. So they have a win percentage of 109. 12-98. So every 15 games they get a win against the A League team. So it really is 2 different leagues. Like, I don't know, that's a thought exercise. If you took the best G League team right now and said, here's 115 games, how many would they win? Like 5? 10? I mean, it is like breaking out into an A League and a B League that essentially, like the other night, it was Friday night, Sunday, where Blazers were doing the game and Bub Carrington, Trey Johnson didn't play, Alex Sarr didn't play, but Bilal Coulibaly, for 3 straight games, they played like the entire first, second, and third quarters, and then they got sat. And Nate Duncan and Josh Robbins went after him. Coach Keefe was like, dude, how can you justify having Alex Sarr foul out in the third quarter when he's your best player, and you just let him foul out? And he said, well, we got to listen to our medical team, and they hit their minutes limits.
Yeah. That to me, see, and that's the other part that's different, right? Is that once upon a time, tanking wore the disguise of player development. I want to see what my young guys have, right? Let's see what the young guys have. Let's play them out there. But when we've reached a point where we're not sitting vets because we don't have vets, we're sitting Alex Sarr, Trey John, guys who've barely 100 games under their belt in the NBA. They're getting sat. Like, what are we doing? What part of this is even player development? There is, because again, that is a real thing. I really don't want to see, for example, last year, I don't want to see Chris Middleton and CJ McCollum go out there and take shots at her. I want to see what Alex Sarr has. I want to see what Bilal Coulibaly has and all these other guys. But it's like, we're removing even that part of it. You're just here to tank and nothing else. That's the part, and I've always used this analogy of like speeding. We all speed. Everyone here is not only sped, but the last time we were in a car, we sped. But there's a difference between I was doing 55 in a 45 and I was doing 100 in a residential zone. And that's what Washington just did, what Utah did earlier. Like, that's the part that where it becomes like, guys, the only reason we're having these conversations is because teams have done away with the auspices of, well, at least we're trying to do. Nope, we're just tanking. We only exist solely to tank, which is why, Jason, I'm not mad at your relegation idea.
Yeah.
Kick these bum-ass organizations out and tell them only the top two make it. Only the top two make it up. Only the bottom two make it down.
My question is, what happens to those relegated teams? Like, why? You got to give me some kind of motivation to care about what's going on over there at all, or else it's like you've essentially just cut 10 teams out of the league. And like, I know it's already kind of happening, right? Because if these tanking teams are playing, who's tuning in besides super sick, diehard fans who love masochism of watching their team lose? But what's the motivation for the relegated teams?
So I think there are some potential upsides here. Cause like, so for example, now let's say you're on the fringe. So let's say you're now this year is such a bad example to Amin's point, cause you have these historic gaps between the 10 and the 11 seeds that make them so outrageous. But imagine, first of all, the first 58 games suddenly become super important. Like, especially if you have an injury, it adds a level of intensity to every game that I think is a value add to the NBA in terms of just regular season intensity.
100%.
Now, if you're on the fringe, let's say you're in 11, let's say there's a 4-team race between 9 and 12. There's a more complicated conversation with ownership where it's like, okay, if I drop into 11 and 12, I get this chance for a top pick. But if I get into that range, all of a sudden my last 26 games, I'm not going to be able to sell tickets as effectively. It's a hurt to the gate revenue. And potentially even to whatever TV deal that you have with your regional broadcaster, right? Similarly, if I'm looking at it the other way, I go, okay, if I go for it here, now I get opportunity for my team to play in higher leverage games, which is better for their development, potentially postseason basketball in the form of the play-in tournament. And I get to have LeBron come to my gate again. And I get to have, Wemby and Giannis and Shea and all these superstars come to my arena again. So it creates more of a complicated decision surrounding the should we go for it or should we not kind of thing. And this is where, like, among the conversation about draft lottery odds, this is where flattening does have an upside. Just as an idea, just imagine a league where suddenly you have these 10 teams that have been cut off of the rest of the league as a temporary relegation for the end of the season, and they each have a 10% shot at the number one pick. Now that suddenly becomes a developmental league. Yes. Now they are going for it. Now there is an incentive to build winning culture. And so whatever you lose in your draft odds, so let's say the difference between you getting like an 18% chance because you had the worst record versus a 10% chance if the odds were flattened, the upside is I'm playing hard for 26 games and my guys are getting great developmental reps and I'm building winning culture, which can translate to future seasons. So I think there are some trickle down effects there that could be positive depending on what you do with the draft odds with that bottom 10.
Is there a world where you can incentivize winning rather than disincentivizing losing? Because I think everything that the NBA is saying is we got to disincentivize the tanking. But Jake Fisher at the Steinline reported that the NBPA has proposed their own ideas that has increased the revenue generation on your wins. Basically, we incentivize winning rather than the cost of tanking. Let's go the other way. Jason, what do you think about that?
So would an owner then be willing to pay whatever that tax is in the form of the revenue share for the sake of improving his draft odds, though? My thing is, like, what if you flipped it and you did like a mini season, and then essentially among those 10 teams, the teams that had the best records got the best picks? That would be a problem, though, because then you'd have teams that would intentionally lose to try to win in that 10.
Right.
So that's tough too. So that's tough. And then can you get, is an owner making more money an incentive for a player to play better basketball too? Like, that's tough. I freely admit, and this is Amin said this earlier, like, these drive him crazy. It drives me crazy too, because like, no matter what you pitch, there's a gaping hole in the idea. like no matter what you pitch, my thing is, like, right now it's broken. And maybe it won't be as bad when Zachary Rissache is the number 1 overall pick, but like, I am generally of the belief that we should constantly be trying to improve the league. And you want to talk about the game becoming boring in March and us talking about MVP and all these different topics, like, March would be a lot more exciting if I think you'd have to do certain things. Like, I don't think you could have guys playing 5 games in 8 nights if they're playing all top 20 teams every single, like, the Lakers just went through that and it's a miracle they survived. Like, there's a certain amount of, like, the schedule would have to kind of lighten up somehow in that phase. But like, I just don't think it's sustainable for the long-term health of the league to have teams intentionally losing, playing teams that are trying to win. It just is a fundamentally flawed concept.
I think that's the bigger issue to me. It's not teams that are trying to lose. It's just teams that are trying to lose against teams that are jockeying for position for meaningful basketball. So while I get to play the Wizards last night, if I'm the Lakers, meanwhile, Phoenix is playing Orlando, who's also fighting for something. And it's like, oh, how is this fair, right? How is this fair that this part of the schedule is soft for some people versus for other people it's a fight to the death? Having said all that, you've said it. Every system has holes in it. It's speeding. You're never going to get rid of it. We just got to figure out a way where everyone acknowledges you can't do 100 in the residential. And so, saying all that, I don't mind solution 1, option 1 of their thing. It's like, hey, flat odds for the 10 that don't make it, and then the remaining 20%, flat odds for the 8 that make to the play-in. Doesn't matter whether you made it to the playoffs or not, doesn't matter. All that matters is that if you were one of these 8 teams in either conference that have to play in the play-in, you get a cut of the lottery odds. No team is going to self-select, would I rather be the 6th seed and have a week off of rest and preparation and know who I'm playing, or would I rather be the 7th seed and also get a 2.5% chance at a top 5 pick? No team is making that leap. You call it a slippery slope. There is no slope. It's a cliff. They're not jumping off that cliff. Similarly, I don't believe, although I'm less confident about this, that a team would forego playing in the play-in in order to be completely in the bottom. I don't believe. Do you know
how many number 10 seeds have made the playoffs in the play-in era?
0.
It's 1. It was the Miami Heat last year when they got.
Yeah, the Heat team.
Yeah. Okay,
so 9 out of the 10 number 10 seeds have made it into the playoffs and got completely embarrassed in one of the most lopsided series in NBA history.
Yeah. Tom, would you get rid of the play-in?
See, that's where I'm like struggling. Is I like the play-in. But it has created this like it has contributed to this stratified league where it's the gap typically was playoff teams and then non-playoff teams. But now we're having postseason teams and non-postseason teams. And I really do think that in that number 1 proposal, I do think teams would tank out of the number 10 spot or the play-in tournament to get into that bottom 10. I really would. Because
so here's the difference. Mm-hmm. You can't all do it.
I know. But that's
right?
but that's the thing is in this system what we have now, there's only how many 4 teams can have the top shot of the number 1 overall pick, and yet we have 9 teams that are tanking.
Right.
To get the number 1 overall pick.
There's a lot more happening there. First of all, let me just say, the play-in is the reason why tanking hasn't been as bad in years past, since its introduction. Because teams that in January and February would have been completely out of the playoff picture, pack it in, play the young guys, all et cetera, et cetera. They still have something to fight for and to live for. In the last few years, we've seen teams like the Houston Rockets 2 years ago, the San Antonio Spurs last year, the Blazers last year. Was it 2-3 years ago? Was it the Wizards? Teams that are like, I could never reach 8, but I can get to 10. And if I get to 10 or 9, I have a little bit of shot. And have used that as a way to develop their young guys to say, hey, this is what meaningful basketball feels like. Even though we fell short of the goal, which is to be a play-in team, you know what it's like. And the next year, usually we've seen a leap from those teams, from San Antonio this year, Houston 2 years ago, whatever. We see that leap. So I think the play-in has been a good carrot. You guys talk about rewarding winning. It's been a good carrot for that. The problem is, again, once you make the decision that this season is done, then I have to make sure. Right. Then I got to make dead sure we're not even close. Because the one thing is, I always believe players want to play and players want to play well. That's the one constant. The part where the trickery happens is when we decide which players are playing.
Yep.
Or how often they're playing. And that's an organizational thing. So when you ask Jason, hey, if we incentivize, give more money to being a postseason team, do the players care? I would say, no, they don't care if their owner makes more money. But they're not the ones who are corrupting the system. It's the owners who are corrupting the system.
Yeah, like those young players do want to win those games before they get pulled. That's gotta. Can you imagine how much that's gotta suck?
Oh, dude,
to be like, I'm in Staples Center hooping, and now I'm out of the game.
Well, you got to protect your health, Jason.